Hey up everybody, my name's Joshua Morrison, director of Johnny Moz's Lessons in Confidence. Today I want to talk a little bit about archiving your previous works of art. So across my life I've made a fair bit of art. I don't like calling it art necessarily, but I mean that's what it is at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, it's a piece of something that you watch for the sake of entertainment, right? That's a good enough definition of art for the sake of this video. So I've made YouTube videos, I've made albums, I've made movies, I've made books, everything, right? And trying all different stuff. And you know, when I was younger, I mean, I've been doing this since I was about 4 years old. I mean, I think the first thing I ever wrote was this sort of 50-page book about, there were these 4 lads that were stuck in a volcano and there was a car and they were all arguing about who gets to drive the car. Meanwhile, the volcano's going off, they're in the volcano, they all end up dying because they couldn't decide, you know, who was going to get to drive the car because they were too busy fighting amongst themselves. And I wrote it out and I printed it, and then I gave it to my local library and I binded it and I gave it to the library and I was like, please keep this. And they did, they put it on the shelf. I remember seeing it in the kids section. I was like, yes, oh, get in. You know, 5-year-old me, published author, you know what I mean? And then as time went on, you know, I kept trying to call up different publishers when I'd be like 8 years old, and I would call up publishers and I'd be like, yo, I've got this new book, you know, Terry Terrible's Mystical Adventures about, you know, Terry Terrible, he's got to go to this orphanage in Iceland that's all evil and all this, that and the other. And, you know, they would try and, I think a lot of these were cons really, because they were trying to make me pay money, and my parents told me, don't you dare set part of any money to try and get yourself published, because a publisher, if they actually want to publish you, will give you the money, not the other way around. And so I internalized that for a long, long time. And then, you know, I kept making stuff. And then I was about sort of 16, 17. I thought, I'm going to go back to that library where I put that book in and see if it's still there. And I went there, you know, new staff, all of that. And I say, you don't happen to have a book by Joshua Morrison, do you? And they put it in the system. It's like, oh, nothing's come up. I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's not in the system. But when I was a kid, I wrote a little manuscript and I binded it and I gave it to the library and they put it on the shelf. Do you happen to still have it? And they didn't have it. I don't know what happened to it in that time. I imagine it either got thrown away, someone took it as a bit of an intrigue sort of thing, or maybe some kid took it and they liked it. You know, I like to think it's the last one. Well, at the end of the day, that is now lost media, literally lost media, because I can't find it, right? And that Terry Terrible thing that I mentioned, oh, that disappeared because I was writing that on the school computers and I didn't realize over the summer holidays that they wiped the computers. So I went back the next term to finish the book off and it was all gone, right? So I've learned the hard way to archive stuff, right? And to take backups seriously. There's the free rule thing of backups, which is you need to have 3 backups on 2 different formats and one of those needs to be in a separate location. So I've got something like 13 hard drives equaling about 35 terabytes of space, right? Because for like Christmas, I basically asked my parents for like 10 years, just get me an external hard drive. Don't even ask me what I want, that's all I want, external hard drives. So I just got external hard drives for about 10 years. And that was my Christmas present, and those Christmas presents are still being used now, right? Storing stuff. Because I have now made it my mission in life to make sure that I never have to deal with losing a piece of my art or a piece of my life again, right? So what have I done? I gave my girlfriend a hard drive, and that's actually come in really handy. It saved me about 15 hours work, that one, because I thought I'd lost something and I went over and I got it from that hard drive. I was like, yes, brilliant, right? And also, I don't even necessarily think it's just about, you know, the convenience of it. I think what's really important is the fact that you made this, you put your life and your soul and your inspiration into this, and for it to just, what, disappear? Nah, sod that. You don't want things to disappear like that. If you created it with a purpose, you want it to stick around. And the amount of times that I've met, you know, other creatives and stuff like that, that have all sort of gone, I made this film ages ago, it's about X, Y, Z, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Where can I see it? And they go, oh, I don't have it anymore. It's like, what's the point of it then? No, it's a lot of effort, you know. It's a lot of effort that you've put into this, and then just for it to disappear. And then they go, oh, but it was crap anyway. So? who cares if it was crap? It was yours. You know, you put hard graft into that. You worked hard to make sure that this thing got made, and now it's just disappeared to the sands of time. So, I mean, I don't even take the hard drives as, you know, a given, or YouTube, for instance. I mean, I've got every single Johnny Mozza video backed up on a hard drive, right? But then, because I think, you know, at one point, who knows? YouTube could just get shut down tomorrow. Google could go into administration. Who knows what's going to happen? You know what I mean? So, I mean, it doesn't sound likely. It sounds laughable now. But you know what? They didn't expect Vine to get shut down, and then it got shut down. No one expected TikTok to take off, but it did, you know? The unexpected happens, right? And it's worth being prepared for it. So I've got everything backed up. And look, I know that a hard drive, an external hard drive, doesn't last forever. However, I do know that the servers for my hard drives aren't going anywhere, right? Unless I throw it off a cliff, it's not going anywhere. It's safe, right? And so it's important to me, I think, to keep an archive of everything that you've worked on, because I think when you make art, you're putting a little piece of yourself into something, right? When I look at old things that I did, old videos that I made about 10 years ago that I look back on, I go, oh, that's kind of cringy. You know, yeah, it's cringy, but that was me. You know, it represents a time in my life. And when I watch these things back, it makes me remember stuff about those times that I would have forgotten otherwise, you know? And I think that's important. It's important to remember all of this stuff, because you know, nothing can be taken for granted in life. Who knows if I might get some debilitating disease like Alzheimer's or dementia when I'm old, and I'll have very little recollection of this sort of thing. I bet if I had dementia, those archives will be invaluable to me. I would love them. I'd be so thankful to my former self for the fact that I've done this, you know? And ultimately, I just think it's important to archive stuff, because you don't know what value someone else might find in it. You know, it might not necessarily be pure entertainment value. It might be a historical document. Who knows? I might turn out to be a serial killer one day, and all these archives could be useful for the police or whatever, or for, you know, the people that are into, you know, how people are into serial killers and stuff like that, like Ted Bundy and all of that. Say if he had an archive of loads of videos that he made, and they all got uploaded to YouTube, I bet people would be way more interested in them, no matter whether they were good, bad, or, you know, god awful. So, yeah, I think it's important to archive stuff. Not just because you can't take tomorrow for granted, but also because you shouldn't take yesterday for granted either. Because you put that effort in, and whether it worked or not, whether it was a successful experiment or a failed experiment, whether you regret making it even, you still made it. And I think it's worth holding on to, because it's a piece of you. And unless it really represents something that you want to get rid of about yourself, if it's something traumatic that you want to remove entirely from your life, I do understand that. But if it's not something like that, why are you throwing it away? Why am I talking to filmmakers that don't have their old films? They should. It's not that hard to back stuff up. You can get a 2 terabyte hard drive for 60 quid. You know, you can get a 5 terabyte one for, like, I think 100 quid. And that should last you a solid, you know, a solid long time, you know. In terms of final projects, I mean, every single video for the Johnny Mozza channel, all 600 of them, saved in original quality, only equals 2 terabytes. So that's still 3 terabytes left. Well, 2.4 terabytes because of all the bullshit. I mean, they sell you a 5 terabyte hard drive and then you get it and it's 4.3. And they go, oh yeah, but it's the amount that's on this disk space, and you know, some of it's been taken up by other stuff. I don't care. If I buy a 5 terabyte hard drive, I want 5 terabytes of stuff to be able to be put on it. I think that's fair enough. But no, apparently not. I don't see what would be wrong with them just advertising as a 4.2 terabyte hard drive personally. It wouldn't bother me. But that's what it is, you know. So I'm not going to complain. Well, I just did complain, so oh well. But the point is that it's worth archiving this stuff. And not just art that you've made deliberately, like a film or a music video or whatever. It's also worth taking all the old videos that you might have taken. You know, like when I was hanging out with my old friends, well, and my friends I still have as well, you know, I was constantly recording stuff. And there's a lot of times in these videos where people go, oh, can you stop recording me? And yeah, maybe I should have, but looking back, these people value the fact that this stuff is here, available to watch. You know, I'm not putting it out there for you know, the general public. It's private, and certainly I cringe at some of it, because some of it is absolutely, oh God, I can't believe I did some of that, you know, or said some of those things. But it's worth keeping because it's you. It's the you that made who you are today. And you want to remember where you came from, your roots, you know, and it's a lot easier to remember that stuff if you've got photographic or written or video evidence of it, rather than just remembering it from rhetoric, you know, or from memories of memories. Ultimately, it's better to know what your past was like objectively and then be able to think about it rather than to take guesses at it and be left in the dark and confused. Because look, say if you've dealt with trauma in your past, right? Isn't it a lot better that you're able to have some kind of objective measurement of what was happening at that time, rather than sitting there guessing and making your own new narrative about it, you know? Ultimately, I think it's worth keeping everything, whether you think it's valuable or not, because you don't know what's going to be valuable to you in the future. I've written journals most of my life, right? And I look at some of those journals and some of them I read and I'm like, I don't care about any of this. And then I read some of them and I'm like, this is really, really interesting. But at the time, I didn't know what was interesting and what wasn't. So now I try and think about what future me is interested in. I try and think, well, me, when I look at the stuff that I view from my past, I like seeing about stuff, you know, what the world was like then compared to now. I think my favorite journal entry that I've ever written is something about, I went to a pub when I was like, I think this was 2017. I went into a pub and I saw Guinness was going for £4.50. And I went, what do you mean £4.50 for a pint of Guinness? That's ridiculous, that's outrageous. How can they justify charging £4.50 for a pint of Guinness? That's ridiculous. But now, you go into a pub and you ask for a pint of Guinness and they say £4.50, you go, oh, that's cheap, you know? So I think I read something from, I can't remember if it was my nan or my aunt, great aunt or something like that, but it was a similar thing talking about how a pint of Stella was going for 75 pence, you know? To me, that sounds like a bargain, but to them it didn't, you know? Or they were talking about, I think when Margaret Thatcher got in, I can't remember what it was about it, but it was just interesting, you know? Historical documents, you know, historical events from a historical document that at the time seemed completely mundane. Little more than a shopping list. And to me, that's interesting. I like hearing about the mundane from a time that's interesting. I like hearing about how people from the 60s went to the butchers and got stuff rather than going to the Tesco's and getting it. You know, I liked hearing about how instead of going and getting like a 20 pack of fucking Bud Light or whatever from the shop, you would go to the pub and drink 20 things of Bud Light. Well, they didn't have Bud Light back then. I don't know what they drank. Pilsner or something. I don't know because I wasn't around back then. But I find it interesting, the day-to-day life. I like hearing about the day-to-day. That's why Gulliver's Travels is one of my favourite books from like the old times. I think it was written in the early 1700s. And my favourite bit about it is when it's all in London. Seeing, you know, that's London set in the present day. You know, that's the modern times when it was written. That to me is absolutely fascinating. But, you know, back then, that was just being set in the real world, you know? Obviously all the Gulliver's Travels, the islands and the giants and the midgets and stuff like that, that obviously wasn't real. But what's interesting about it is the fact that it all seems so boring to them. But to me, it's also fascinating, you know? The tailor, we don't go to tailors anymore. Now we just get a new pair of shoes. That's just interesting to me. So yeah, I hope you managed to get something out of this video. Let me know your thoughts on it. Let me know if you value archiving stuff. Maybe you have a different perspective from me. Maybe you disagree with this entirely. And if you do, I'd love for you to put it down in the comments below because I'm interested in hearing other opinions on this because I know that I'm not the arbiter of fucking knowledge or common sense. Other people might have a completely different take on this. And I want to get some kind of discussion going around this because who knows, maybe I'm in the minority on this. Maybe a lot of people would prefer to forget the past and embrace the future or embrace the present. To me, I think that the past is a tool for embracing the present so that you can make a better future. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.